We see some great moments, but the worst moment for Peter, I think, was when he denies Christ.
Denial, yeah.
And
Jesus told him he was going to.
He told him, yeah. And he's so distraught and so
bewildered. Yeah.
Amazed that he not only would do it, but did do it.
Mm-hmm.
That he retreats all the way back to some former life where he goes fishing.
With God, there is always more. More love, more life, more freedom. Welcome to Zoe's Exploring More with Michael Thompson. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Our Heavenly Father has provided many delightful inns for us along our journey, but He takes great care to see that we do not mistake any of them for home." Join me and the team as we explore the kingdom together, discovering the deep truths and offering encouragement for the journey. There is always more.
Welcome, friends and allies, to the Exploring More podcast. Michael Thompson and S.J. Jennings exploring the kingdom together and just talking.
Yeah, two guys.
About stuff in the kingdom and in our lives. So welcome if you're new to the podcast. This is episode, I see here, 350.
Wow.
350. That's amazing.
If you put it on me to guess what episode this was, I probably would have said 2 something.
I'd be 2 something. Yeah, exactly. So,
wow.
Yeah, maybe we could just archive and destroy that first 150.
Well, they're all audio, so
that's right.
That you don't have to look at us for those. So I don't know, that may appeal to some people.
I think we said 7-8 years now of this. 8 years.
Yeah, I think we started in 18.
So that I'm not cringing, but I'm like, oh man, I wonder how what we said, how we said it.
Some of you longtime listeners maybe offer up some anecdotes of early episodes.
What goofballs. Hopefully the evolution, though, of us and this show have led us to some good things. I like Tom.
We've been on a journey, so is the show.
Our friend Tom has been great. He said not too long ago, he said, I like that you guys aren't as definitive as you used to be. You used to just talk like you knew what you were talking about. Now there's, these, what is that when you put an asterisk by it?
Well, yeah, it's one of those ones that like, yeah, man, I like your new haircut because the last one.
Man, how you used to wear your hair for the first 20 years.
It's kind of that compliment, but also a little bit of a gut punch, like, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So it's good to have friends.
It is.
But we are exploring the kingdom in regards to shame, and this series is getting more freedom from shame.
Yeah,
and I think that we established in the first episode, this is not rare. As a matter of fact, this is every
100%
image bearer, common 100% has had altercations and incidents in their lives that have led to beliefs and feelings of shame, which is, in a bottom line, is more than you did something wrong or didn't do something right. It's identity. It's marring of you at a core soul heart level. No, there's something wrong with you, and
that's the voice.
That's the voice
shame,
of it.
Yeah,
that's the voice of it. And it, if somebody came up to you on the street and just yelled that at you, you would, I think 90% of people would go, screw you.
Yeah, what are you talking about?
Who are you?
Right. You don't have that authority in my life.
And you would call somebody, depending on the size of the person.
Right.
You would not take it.
Yeah.
it would be insulting.
And yet,
And yet,
in the spiritual realm, I don't know,
emotional realm, the mental
the
realm,
internal, the voices, right, of
yeah,
Satan, the world, the flesh, the unholy trinity, they come in and we sign for these things.
Oh yeah. So accepting them, is never a good idea, especially the offerings of shame. I mean, my point is, if we personified it,
right,
you would unsubscribe. You would report it.
Right.
You would
repel it.
You would find some help
right.
to get away. Get away from it. Get this away from you.
From me, yes.
I mean, asbestos.
Pepper
spray, mold in your crawl space, or you would not live like that.
Right.
You would not live under the influence of some. You had bats in your attic.
Oh yeah,
really? I mean,
I did. Took me 6 months to get them out of there. They're protected. Did you know that? Yeah, and they're cute little guys, but they're so destructive.
That's why you had no mosquitoes out in your neck of the woods,
exactly
which you should have. But I mean,
yeah,
dude, this is what
infiltrates.
I know it's a bit silly, but it's not.
Yeah, it's not. And we didn't have a chance to share this in the last episode, but what shame needs to survive, to your point, like if you want to kill this thing, or if you don't actually actively engage and engage with the power and authority given to you by Christ in this thing, in getting it out of your heart, mind, and soul, it's going to survive. And this is like oxygen for shame, okay? Secrecy, silence, and judgment.
Yeah.
Secrecy, silence, and judgment.
And a reinforcing cycle of those things. And
right.
So, yeah. It's very, very personifying, I think, helps. Mm-hmm. Not only legitimize it, but then if we can legitimize it, maybe we can move to, hey, the MRI showed, the blood work showed, the test showed.
You have a can of pepper spray. You can get rid of this assailant. Mm-hmm. I mean, all of those different ways of looking at it.
Yeah. It doesn't just go away.
No.
Even, let me just say, and I am all about God, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. But just because it showed up on the x-rays, if you got that far,
mm-hmm.
that doesn't equal healing.
Right.
And so
awareness.
So to your example, healing. The pepper spray or the repelling it of some way, well, that would have been a good idea when you were 8 mm-hmm. or 6. Don't let any more of that get on you. But if it's already in there, like you said earlier, as an infection,
sure.
as an agent of shame, as an agent of control, because that's really what the enemy wants to do, is control
through these methods,
these different methods, and so that's why there's power in their voice, there's power in their presence. I don't think these are hollow monsters. I think they have teeth, and they will. They will feast, and they do feast on you. Like, I know that sounds pretty yucky.
It is.
I'm just coming to
there's a reason it sounds yucky.
That sounds pretty gross. You said in the last episode, I read Scarlet Letter. They should not let 8th graders read that. I was like, yes.
All quiet on the Western Front.
Yes, should not let some of that stuff happen. So that's where we're going into another round of this in episode 2 on From Shame to Freedom on the Exploring More podcast. We will be right back after a short message.
Heart of a Warrior is definitely a place where I feel like men can come as they are, right? So inviting a man to come as they are and to find out that there's more for them right? That God has more in store for them, and more in store in the sense of things that maybe they haven't yet known or uncovered, I think is why I would invite another man to Heart of a Warrior, to welcome them into a brotherhood where they can feel like they're not alone in a world where we often feel like we're the only ones going through something. So just that simple invite has the opportunity to change the course of another man's story drastically. So that's why I would invite a man to Heart of a Warrior.
Welcome back from that long introduction.
I forgot about the break entirely.
and
I was
into the
so
break.
into what we were
Yeah.
talking about. I was like, oh yeah, take a break.
And in this episode more, I think specifically, we're kind of hitting the. I love that we talked about some films last
stories
episode and how they are as stories, and I think there's a relevance in the scriptures to bringing to the conversation what I said earlier about Jesus and his way with people who were so bound by not just physical infirmities, but the emotional, mental, and spiritual infirmity of that condition allowed. So. I think one of the quickest, easiest one is the woman at the well. If you've heard any exegesis of that passage, you get it's a confrontation, if you will, with Jesus, but it's so full of pieces and ingredients. Like, she's there in the middle of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody else is there in the middle of the day because of the chore that getting water was. She literally is not going at the cooler times when more people would be there. So she is, getting her water. And as you get into the story, her reputation is not good.
No.
And instead of, so she knows to stay away from the town folk, let's say, to stay out of, take the back streets and to show up for water at a time that would be less confronting with, people in her neighborhood. And yet, when she encounters Jesus, she's got a pretty good chip on her shoulder. She's pretty salty.
Yeah. I love he walks up to her and says,
"What's going
on?
on?
Have a drink?"
Yeah, what's going on?
He's asking her for water.
Yeah, how are you?
Yeah.
And she's like, "What are you doing talking to me?"
How can you, a Jew, ask me, a Samaritan woman, for a drink?
Let me translate that. Yo, what's your problem?
What is your deal?
Yeah. She's a Bostonian.
Look at this guy.
I'd love to
this guy.
I'd love to have that passage translated by a skit group.
I just found there's on the YouVersion Bible app. I don't necessarily recommend it, but it's funny. There's a y'all version of the Bible in there. But what if there was a Boston version of the Bible?
It'd be great. Look at this joker.
Okay, so back to the point.
Asking me for water.
Yeah. What are you doing?
So anyway, and it's just it's a confrontation, which I love that word, that leads to a transformation.
Yeah.
And Jesus starts to do what he does and says, "Oh,
let me help you see what I see.
What I'm asking.
Uh-huh.
I'm asking for water.
Yeah.
And what I want to give you is me.
Is living water.
Is me.
Yeah.
The water's not real. I'm not that thirsty.
Yeah. Well, and she even says it's too deep. I don't have any way to get this water out. What's this living water you're talking about? Oh, so glad you asked.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's really, really cunning how he does it.
Oh my gosh.
And,
yeah, man.
And the Jesus asks the questions that are actually pushing the buttons, because the buttons are there to be pushed.
Yeah.
About the husband.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Go and call your husband. Yeah.
I have no. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
Now who's the joker?
Yeah. Yeah.
Let me. You don't. You've had several.
Right.
So she is just absolutely goes from hiding to, entering
This place of shame.
entering
Yes.
into this, and she believes him. She believes Jesus that he has something more
Right.
than what she's experiencing,
Right.
and what she's, and a lot of people have done things that they knew what they were doing. We're talking now about a woman at the well, not a little girl.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus has some pretty strong language for people hurting the souls of little ones.
Mm.
It'd be better for a millstone to be tied around your neck and you thrown overboard
Right.
for bringing harm to these little ones. I'm going to use that a little bit to say, yeah, he's talking about, I think, even the weightiness and the significance of shaming and hurting, because you hurt a little one. Shame is right there opportunistically. And to help that little one recover is a woman at the well experience, where so much of her story is supported even by her. So shame has that ability, SJ, I think, to not only bring you under judgment and condemnation, but then self-judgment and self-condemnation.
No question.
And then perpetuation.
No question.
So it's trying to get you...
Perpetuation and propagation.
It's trying to get you in this autopilot
Yep.
of under its influence.
Yeah. And even, I would say too, Michael, in the work that I have done to break free from things that I'm ashamed of, the packages don't stop coming.
Yeah.
Right? They will, once I've taken those packages off the shelf, I have received forgiveness and grace and living water that finally quenches that thirst, and I'm free of those things, right? And however long it is, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years later, got a package for you, Mr. Jennings, and if you're not careful, you sign for that crap again.
Yeah.
It will try to come back around.
And there's because we're going to continue to progress in our story. We've never been here before.
Yeah.
So, the opportunities are many to be shamed, to not only make just the fact that you're going to keep making some mistakes. I hope we make fewer, but to make some mistakes. I would dare say it's not the sin moment. It's actually what's driving you to that moment.
Mm-hmm.
It's what is at work. And fear and shame have, this tag team game that I didn't know what to do, so I didn't do anything. Wow, how passive. I didn't know what to do, so I tried that. Wow, you thought that was going to work? How foolish. Again, as if I'm personifying the actual
spirit.
Voices.
Yeah.
And how they work. I mean, it's very, very, very challenging. I think what Jesus did for the woman at the well was a beautiful thing. One of my favorite stories, though, and I think a very popular one, is Jesus with Peter.
Yeah. I had a pastor that said he was the disciple that carried a knife.
Yeah. Not to mention
and all that implies.
Not to mention some left hook.
Yeah, not afraid to use it.
I think that's how they put him in the Chosen. He was a bodyguard.
Yeah.
Is how Simon Peter is depicted in there. It's great character, and yet we see Peter. We see some great moments, but the worst moment for Peter, I think, was when he denies Christ.
Denial, yeah.
And
Jesus told him he was going to.
He told him, yeah. And he's so distraught and so
bewildered. Yeah.
Amazed that he not only would do it, but did do it.
Mm-hmm. That
he retreats all the way back to some former life where he goes fishing. So that I think what's so horrible about the weight of all of that, of betrayal. I mean, here's a betraying moment where Peter betrays Jesus, and Jesus knew he would. He told him he would, but the effect of that on Peter, is not. He's not justifying it at all. He is grieving, and feeling the weight of that betrayal, and so then we find Jesus does something just remarkable. He doesn't say, "I told you you would," but we see Jesus. He doesn't reinterpret what Peter did and say, "Oh, it wasn't that big a deal." He just loves him back to closeness. He builds a fire on the beach, resurrected Jesus. You think he would kind of do that wizard thing or something, just yeah, but he's still playing by these rules.
Yeah.
And so, you catch anything? And Peter just really doesn't want to be bothered. I think he's in the boat personally, and not throwing a net, not really doing anything. I think
kind of moping out there.
Oh man, just and then he's Jesus kind of reenacts when the time that he first called Peter into friendship, into apprenticeship, into discipleship.
So Peter would be awakened to who it is that's speaking to him.
And the scene is he tries to walk on water a second time. I think Peter really thought that in this moment he could do it again. So he tries to run, overboard, all this stuff, runs to the shore, and sure enough, there's Jesus. So what an example in that story of just a brutal encounter with shame and a beautiful encounter with the one who can, free you from it.
It makes me think about guys, myself included, we talk to, and, whether it's around a campfire or it's a one-on-one medic appointment or whatever it is. When a guy says, "I've never told this to anybody before."
Yeah.
I mean, that moment doesn't happen.
Buckle up.
For Peter in that moment.
Yeah.
That's probably one of those things, he takes with him to the grave, or just maybe in a moment he says, "I've never told anybody about this before, but I denied Christ 3 times. And that shame that keeps that thing hidden, right? So the holiness of the moment, as we it feels like we're turning a little bit into how do we move towards being set free from these things, being released from them, right?
Yeah.
The way that Peter was with Jesus. When a man says, "I've never told anyone this before," that is an indicator, potentially, I won't say 100% of the time, but it's potentially one of those things that he's kept hidden because he's ashamed of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's 2 categories, right? One is something that was done to them, or something that they did or are doing. And I think,
oh man, and that can just get cloudy, right?
Oh yeah.
Because I remember when God, I won't say he confronted me, but he made an offer. Like, are you ready to stop? Are you ready to let this go? Are you ready to talk about this? And it was when I was abused when I was younger, and I'm in the moment in the meeting room at the encounter weekend, and there's an open door right there for me to escape through once again.
Yeah.
Go back to where I've been, and instead I go up and talk to a guy, and I said those very things. I've never shared this with anybody. And B, I was convinced it was my fault.
Yeah.
I was convinced it was something I did. To your point, it's either something I did or something was done to me. Well, I thought it was something I did somehow.
Yeah.
That I somehow acquiesced to or promoted or encouraged. when really it was something that was done to me. And most of the work that my friend that helped me see was that it was something that was done to me.
Yeah.
And I had been put in a position to keep it in the dark, silence, secrecy, and judgment. And so you live under this thing for 30 years plus.
Yeah, I think that is, a question for our listeners, a question, is there something that's happened to you or something that you did that nobody knows, no soul knows? You do not want it to be told. You do not want it found out. Is there any part of your story that way that is a awful and yet important place to go where you could find the roots of shame? And I think about our invitation to live like Jesus, to live and become more and more like him with nothing to hide, nothing to prove, and nothing to fear. I mean, what antidotes for, or what results of getting free from shame? Nothing to hide, prove, or fear. And so if you have something to hide or something to prove or something to fear, I would, I found when we moved into our home some years ago, at 4322, I don't know what happened. I put the shovel in. So anyway, I found they must have had a dog before, because there was the wiring for electric fence. You just start pulling, and it's only about that deep, but it had been there long enough. No sign of it. I'm just saying it's that kind of thing. This tripwire.
What is this?
Yeah,
you start pulling on it.
Where's it go?
Right.
And how long has it been here? That's something to hide, prove, and fear. Have a real invitation to, what is it that's causing that? What happened in my life and what happened in my story that taught me to hide or has made me prove, try to control? I mean, these are the things that I think Jesus is really after, not your behavior or your sin, but the things that are actually at work in your belief system, that is affecting your behavior, or to use that word again, sin. So I it's a very, very powerful tool, and that makes it sound something concrete. It's more of a pill, of a saw a show the other day where, they just kept injecting this person with this virus. They just injected him, each day to kind of keep it up. And I think shame works a similar way. There's some kind of maintenance program. There's some kind of operating system. There's some kind of, tangled up in us is this thing, that, what is that? Sometimes you go overseas and you've got to get some of these shots and take some of these pills so that you don't contract some parasite.
Yeah.
And that's a great word, a very powerful parasite that needs a host and is absolutely about in some way, shape, or form,
slowly sucking the
feeding off of you, and
dude.
feeding then to you. I mean, it's pooping in you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that can't be good.
No, it can't be good. Yeah. Yeah. I think about Psalm 139, verse 23. Search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thought.
Yeah.
See if there is any offensive way in me and lead me in the way everlasting. When I read that the first time, I was like, oh, that's about sin. That's about what I do that pisses God off.
Fair.
Hacks him off, the way you would say, your Oklahoman way.
Yeah.
More and more I've come to understand that, maybe it's that. But I think it's more, what are these things in us that are operating that are not of him?
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
There's a nuance there, and help me to flesh it out a little bit. But what is offensive to God is sin, not the sinner.
Yeah.
So if this thing exists in you and you're holding on to this shameful thing,
Or it's holding on to you.
or
right?
it's holding on to you, moving away from this position of judgment, right? So, okay, let me give this metaphor. Shame needs secrecy, silence, and judgment to exist. Okay, so when I was in the fire academy, they taught us how to put out a fire, and most folks would think the way you put out a fire is you put water on it, and that's true. But what's actually happening when you put water on a fire, there's a chemical reaction happening. So what you're doing when you're smothering the fire with water is you're taking away one of the four things that needs to be there for fire to exist. It needs a fuel source, it needs heat, it needs a chemical reaction, and it needs oxygen. Okay, so if you take one of those away, the fire goes out. That's why when you put a candle under a glass, the fire goes out, because you're taking away the oxygen. You put water, you're taking away the heat, right? So what if we could think of shame the same way? The way to strangle out shame in your life is to remove one of the things that shame needs to survive.
Yeah.
So, or all of them: secrecy, silence, and judgment, right?
Yeah.
I think judgment is probably the hardest one.
Sure.
But the secrecy and the silence, that can go away when you say, Michael, I'm going to share this.
Can we talk? Can I tell you something?
Yeah, I've never told anybody.
Right. Yeah. I mean that, and you want to be careful who you tell. I get it.
Yeah.
And to find that moment when it is right to be exposed. I know we've taught for a long time and learned from others in this idea of trauma and wounding and the voice that it has, the experience that it is, and it has an effect on the one being traumatized that has to come up with some conclusion, has to come up with some reasoning, has to come up with some definition or description of what that was and why.
What you're saying is whether it's accurate or not.
Right.
It needs to.
Right.
The equation has to be balanced, even if it's wrong.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. And, here's a stupid example, but if you let me go hit another 1,000 golf balls and say, come back when you've kind of worked it out, it's not going to get that much better. Okay, 5,000. Go hit 5,000 more golf balls. It's not really going to get much better.
Yeah.
Unless I have someone who knows, can look at my swing, can look at my way, and start to bring some corrective measures. So
otherwise you're just reinforcing the wrong way to hit a golf ball.
As if I knew how.
Right.
So, the guys on tour aren't just that good because they hit 1 million balls in a year. They're that good because they had teachers and have experimented with many, many different ways to work within their particular way. And you can see dozens of different swings.
Oh yeah.
On the PGA Tour.
Oh, yeah.
So I bring that up to say, to really interpret accurately and have somebody to advocate, for you, and to get the kind of counsel that's needed to be in a safe space to say, this is what happened to me. It's just so significant to the healing process if that person really is a good coach, a good counselor, and is able to empathize. It's amazing what listening and sympathy and empathy, even what that does to the hold of shame.
Yeah.
To not pass judgment. Now it's not a secret anymore, but you can make it not a secret, and you can make it not a secret anymore, and it doesn't mean judgment's gone.
Mm-hmm.
You told somebody, but how they handled that.
Right, they could bring judgment to that moment.
Yes, is brutal. So I think,
be cautious.
But to take inventory on these vows and agreements, take inventory on the interpretation of the things that have happened to you when you were traumatized or wounded. That's kind of the stuff that cultivates and continues to propagate this shame thing. And now you have it to where it's actually a part of how you interpret your life. It doesn't just want...
It's ingrained.
It doesn't just want to infect you in that life. It wants to impair you from being able to have a life of healthy and intimate relationships, connection. And it brings about sabotage and many, many other things. So I think whether they were embarrassing moments or humiliating events, or worse, I think the one thing that I'll end this episode on, and we'll talk about more, is just the role and the place of sexual. We were naked and unashamed. Here's the garden, you guys. Here's the keys. Enjoy. He wasn't necessarily talking about the leaves and the grass and the animals. I mean, and there's an enjoyment of one another. And so I think this is, if an act of intimacy physically, at its heightened is this idea of, connecting sexually, it is probably the greatest form of shame making, and is involved in some of the deepest and hardest ways of binding us in terms of the effect. Pornography, yes, throw that in the conversation, but sexual assault, sexual abuse, and how much larger those categories really are, I think, for people. Seeing something when you're 8 or 9 or 10, hearing something when you're there's a lot of things that can happen in I would say the sexual lane that can bring about a deep sense of shame that will impair, and so we'll talk some more about the effects of that in the next episode, and hopefully we touched on a little bit of the remedy and a little bit of the hope and a little bit of the antidote. And I think as we descend a little bit deeper into the wildness of that, then what would it look like for Jesus to come into that space for the relief.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Looking forward to it, man.
Okay.
It's a heavy subject to talk about, buddy.
Yeah.
It is. I feel it.
Yeah.
Spiritually. So, if you've got questions, comments, things you want to, maybe even want to have us talk about or reach out to you about, leave a comment in the comment section, send us an email, exploringmore@zoe.org.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
We'll see you next time on the Exploring More podcast.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Exploring More. The landing page for this podcast is zoe.org/podcast. That's ZOWEH.org/podcast, where you can find the show notes and various platforms to which we broadcast. You can also find us and the Life of More by visiting Zoe on YouVersion Bible app, Right Now Media, our Facebook page, and Zoe on Instagram and Twitter. Remember, with God there is always more, and you were made for more.